All right, so we've got our obligatory weather chat out of the way, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. So yeah, welcome to our webinar today. Today we are talking about internal succession. So finding that employee that you can pass your business on to. And our guests today are Dan Carroll, and he is a former owner of Seven Seas Pools and Spas, and then Ron Perkins, who is the current owner of the business. We will get to that discussion in a moment, but I just wanted to say, feel free to put any questions or comments in the Q&A, and I will be sure to pass that along. If I remember, which I'll try really hard to do this time, we'll have a couple of polls for you guys to answer some of my questions as well as we go. But we highlighted Ron's story in the last issue of the magazine. Everybody check that out. But I'm excited to get Dan's perspective today. And so Seven Seas was started in 1977 by your father, and
Correct.
then you took official total control of the business in 2003.
Correct.
All right. And then Ron bought it in 2000, end of 2003 or 2004 or 2002. Now I can't remember.
End of 22.
End of
2000.
22. Okay. Okay, great. So I think, Dan, my first question to you is, when did you start thinking about your succession plan? When did that start to become a priority for you?
Probably the day I started working in the business. It was like, how long do we want to do this? But there was never really an official starting point. It was the business was good, everything was going along for what we thought was well. But as we grew bigger and bigger, it just became this giant monster. And until you see the end, you'll never see it until, I mean, to actually think you're going to have a plan for it, it's pretty hard to do, to say, okay, I'm out of here in 10 years. When it was a family business that you were in since you were 10 years old, you never thought of that. There was no organization. Once Ron had come on in 2011, it was like, okay, now we can start focusing on growing the business, making it profitable, that, okay, maybe someday somebody would want to buy this thing. But we never really gave it an official, there was never an official start time of, okay, this is when we're going to do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty common for most small business owners, but at least, like you said, you started thinking about it, at least thinking about it at the beginning, right? Even if there wasn't a formal, now we're starting our succession plan date, it was always in the back of your mind that you needed somebody to take over it at some point.
right. I mean, there's in the pool business, not so much the spa business, the dealers just go until they're, basically till they're dead. They don't make any plans. We're not the smartest people in the world. It seems like the spa industry has a much better, I wouldn't say an education, but a much better design of what they're trying to accomplish. And when that started getting perfected into business with what Ron was doing for us, it, kind of gave us the goal that, yeah, we've got to get out of here. There has to be a plan for that. It truly probably got started in the early 2000s. BioGuard had created a program called BioGuard University. And
Okay.
that university was about intermingling with other dealers to find out what they're doing to make a plan to get out. How are you going to do this? Is there, are you actually set to do anything? Are you healthy enough to get out? And in 2002, 2003, we weren't. And it was a matter of getting our books straightened up, get some direction. And if you want to sell your business, you actually have to have something that's worth selling. Most
Yeah.
pool dealers don't. Spa dealers do. They've got a much better idea of where they're headed. So
Yeah. Yeah. So my next question was going to be, kind of how did you prepare before sort of reaching out to Ron and bringing him on and starting that whole process? But it sounds like your preparation was, getting your books in order and making sure you had a sellable asset.
well, the probably the downfall to our business and the growth of the business was in 2007, 2006. Actually, I got greedy and built the superstore, the Clarion store that Ron now has, and it was in an area that really wasn't intended for that size of a store. Um, Built way too big, but it was our home. It was where we were servicing our other three small stores at the time. Well, we finished that store in June of 2007, and then the economy tanks,
Yeah,
and
not the greatest timing.
horrible.
Yeah.
So having an idea a few years in advance of that, of okay, we have to get our books in order. Then you go into desperation mode for 3 years. The whole goal was, how do we get out of here? How do we make our books good, make the business healthy? It was a 3-year deal of expanding. We expanded to the Du Bois area, then expanded down to the Cranberry Township area. And that's how we ended up with Ron, actually, was the opening of the store down in the greater Pittsburgh market. We needed someone that could handle the growth here. And
Mhm.
as he stated in his last webinar with you, I was focused on construction. We were leaving the other stuff go. It was working, but it was not our concentration. And knowing that we needed help there, didn't expect him to do what he did. Like he explained before, it was okay, hey, I want to have full control of this. Well, in 30 days, when he fires the general manager that you have and he takes over and runs, it kind of lights the fire behind us that, okay, there could be a future here for us.
Okay. Okay. I have one follow-up question to that because in every single webinar that we've had, almost every single person I have talked to who has successfully sold their business, the first thing they say is, you have to have your books in order, you have to have your house in order. You've got to, like, that is your very first, like, baby step to doing this. But I also don't think we've ever, like, explained very well to anybody, like, what does that actually mean? Because, you obviously have books, you pay your taxes. So for you, what did it mean to, quote unquote, get them in order?
Well, a business owner, we all think that our business is worth more than it is. It
Right.
truly is only as good as what the books show. Well, whenever your father teaches you for 20 years and old school people teach you 20 years, just, spend everything you can, hide everything you can, don't show a profit, don't pay any taxes. Well, when that comes time for banking, and that's actually the '08 issue with all the banking issue there, we tried to expand to our Du Bois store and they looked at our tax returns. It's like, no, you're not making much money here, because that's just all we ever did. And
Sure.
all businesses run like that. But when you start realizing that banks only care about how much return on investment they're going to get, how much money is in that, that the taxes are actually showing, you start learning how to become healthy. It's not about how much can you put in your pocket. You need to make that business look profitable and be profitable. And
Right.
yeah, it's profitable, but whenever you're taking it all for yourself, that's not the way to do it.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I feel like that was a point of clarification that we just haven't asked before. So I appreciate you kind of explaining that to everybody.
One other,
Um,
one of the other vendors, actually Watkins, do you remember what that program was called? You weren't on there yet. In '08, '09, when the economy was the Gemini program Watkins had done in 2008, we were invited to that. And at the time, we were doing 50 spas, and we're there with the big monsters out of Oregon, out of Maine, and all that. And when they tell you, if you want to do this program, you're going to open up your books to all the other dealers, that's eye opening. And a lot of dealers were uncomfortable with that. But until you learn that the books are your books, it doesn't matter. We learned so much from seeing what other dealers were doing.
yeah.
How do we get ourselves healthier? It's all about being healthy, not about, making all the money. If you're healthy, it'll come after that. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you brought Ron on in 2011. And when you did that, did you have in mind that he could be a potential successor for you, or were you just looking for help and he had the skills?
did we even talk about it at the time?
When I first came up and met with you in 2011, we sat in your office and kind of like went over the position, what you were looking for. Then the conversation kind of came up like, we don't want to do this forever,
Right, right.
and we're not sure if the kids are going to want to be involved or not. And is it something that would interest you down the road?
I think it's more of like planting a seed for
Yeah,
you because
like,
you were
yeah.
young at the time. So it's, no one was thinking anything like that would happen, but I think getting that seed planted.
Yeah, he planted the seed in my head, and he'll tell you that once I have something in my head, I don't usually let it go.
It sticks pretty good. So
I'm kind of that way, and it was one of those things of like, all right, well, we're going to build this and be involved with it. The potential for our future to be the owners and have this business and in the future was exciting for me, and something that was a dream for me down the road. I was very young guy at that point in time. I was 26 years old and didn't really have a necessarily plan for my future of where I was going. Cause I was
Sure.
planning to be with Lowe's for my career and decided that wasn't the path for me and my family. So when we came into this, I was kind of at a blank slate in my life of like, I don't really know exactly where I want to go with this. And when he kind of talked about it, it planted a seed in my head of, hey, this could be the direction that we go, and this could be the future that we could have. And I want to be a part of that. So
You probably didn't look at it then as just a paycheck either. You know, it was something that he put in the effort that, okay, he's going to get a return for that effort. So I don't know that it was a plan, but it definitely worked out that way.
yeah, I mean, it was kind of the initial conversation of like, hey, this could be something that happened. It wasn't like, hey, we want to sell the business to you. We want to do this. It was like, hey, if this comes up down the road, would that, so he knows, is that something that interests you? A lot of people would say, hey, you want to do that? And they'd be like, I have no interest in owning my own business. I don't
Sure.
want a headache. Where I was probably dumb enough to say, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll do that.
And at that time that was our fourth store we had expanded to when Ron had come on. I was only 45 at the time. So it's not, and my wife was 45. So it's not like
Yeah.
we had a
You
lot
were
of
in a
time.
hurry.
It wasn't a big a deal. We were in no hurry whatsoever. It just kind of, there was definitely a lot of luck involved. Well, for both of us, there's luck. There's no way around it. So
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, you didn't know if your kids would want to take the business over. Um, was that something that you were hoping or thinking would potentially happen?
I was second generation. My
Mhm.
son in 2010 had just graduated high school, was going to college.
Yeah.
He had worked crew for installation. He had worked the store all through high school, worked there during college. There was interest there. I wanted him there, but also knew not to push him into it because third generation is very, very tough. Anyone that knows it, there's a lot of effort to get that third generation to be successful with it.
Yeah.
The issue was he knew all the problems that were part of the business, being a family business, how much it affects your home life, how much it affects your family life. So it was on his mind for a while. He was actually military, kept it on his mind for quite a while, but it was not top of mind. He was interested, but it wasn't that important to us if it went to him or not. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great gift that you can give your children. It's a great gift if you can, give them your business, but also if you don't have to.
absolutely. But it also was never thought of as a gift to him. It was gonna be a buyout,
Right.
through him, and I would stay on and, tutor with him and help him along, knowing how much work it was gonna be, but there's always the effort or always the thought process, hey, I'm just gonna give our children the business. We've worked too hard to walk away from something we've done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was definitely a plan, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned, the first 30 days with Ron and him kind of just like taking the reins and running with it. I mean, when do you feel like it kind of became apparent that, okay, maybe this is someone who I really could prepare to take over this company?
Well, I think the input I got back from some of the employees at the time, and you had mentioned it before about Kim, they wanted to kill him, because it was his way or no way. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, there was some fight there, but I could see what he was trying to do was completely opposite of what I was doing. I wasn't paying attention. He was. And if we had one part of the business perfected and he was willing to perfect the whole entire other part of the business, let him go, whatever he wanted to do. I think you knew you pretty much there was a long leash for Ron. He didn't, I don't know if we didn't even talk for the first couple of years.
Not
Hey, we'd
really.
see each other at the family reunion or family gatherings and stuff, but he was let alone to do what he wanted to do because he was doing it right. So that was the important part. We recognized that very early. So
Yeah. And I should have mentioned this earlier, but you are related. I think your wife, Ron's wife, Lindsay, is your.
wife's first cousin.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
They grew up together, even though they didn't live in the same area. Lindsay's, 15 years younger than my wife Connie.
Okay.
So that she had known her since, Lindsay was born, and that, is kind of like Connie's younger sister.
Yeah.
But it's more about the families. I met Ron at the family gatherings, the holiday gatherings, things like that.
Yeah.
Didn't really know much about him, just from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we should mention this. Like, I guess technically this could be like a family business, transition, but yeah, it really ended up being more of a like employee, I guess, than family
It
situation.
really was. I mean, Ron and I were always labeled as the outlaws in the family. We're not in-laws, we're the outlaws, because we just kind of kept to ourselves. And even before he was in the business, we just kind of hung out, at them, trying to avoid the family.
We
So I'm
stayed-
not gonna lie about it.
We
So.
stayed in the corner. Where are you at? I'm going over there.
But yes, it's great to have helped a family member, quote, but it was definitely an employee, buyout.
Yeah. So you bring Ron in, he takes the bull by the horns. I guess, when did you start to think, all right, I need to start training him in some ownership areas, and sort of how did that work? Because at some point you're like, okay, I think we're going to want to actually try to make this happen.
Well, I think that in part of your outline, Megan, you had asked one of the questions about, planning this, was there training? And I think that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that we made, and a lot of business sell-offs do. They don't train well enough in that. Ron was trained in everything he did on his own, but I probably didn't make any effort at teaching him as he knows now. It's a big difference owning the business than it is working the business.
Sure.
He learned the hard way the very first year into it. If someone is to go, if they're going to make a plan and they pick that person that's going to buy the business, I think we both would agree that there's a lot more we would have done different earlier
Sure.
on to make it easier for him. It wasn't that it was difficult, but we had 40 years of knowledge on business and vendors and bookkeeping. Lindsay and Ron had zero. They understood it, but there's a lot that he would have gained by learning earlier on, and setting aside by taking the time to learn that. It would have made the transition for him much smoother, I guess.
Yeah, the timetable was short for what we did, and there's things we could have done differently for sure. But Dan was very good at communicating a lot of things over the years with me. Whenever I asked the question, he didn't sugarcoat it. He told me the truth. And sometimes I listened and sometimes I didn't listen.
Would do it his own way.
But he knows I'll listen, but I'm going to do it my way. And it's the same with him. We're both very bullheaded in the way we do things.
Absolutely.
And that's the type of person that I think that you want to take over your business, that is going to say, well, listen, I'm going to hear you, and I'm going to go through the process, that's in front of us. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely things that, well, I wish I'd have known that. I wish I would have known that. It wasn't prepared for that, but the business was strong enough. The foundation, the support system that was here for this particular business was around me, that I had people that I could lean on.
And you had built that team,
Yeah.
From 2011, you had built that team all along that you were able to lean on to.
Yeah,
So.
it wasn't like I had to worry about people leaving and things like that. Like, I had a very good rapport with them, had a lot of years with them, which made it nice, and trust in my staff to support me. And it wasn't like me and Dan it wasn't like the business was sold and we never spoke. We definitely took that time, or if I had things I had questions about, if I felt like I hit a roadblock, I'm very much a do it myself kind of guy. Like, I'll figure it out. But if I got to a point where I'm like, I just can't figure this out, I gotta call Dan. He was there to support me. So, even though I didn't know everything I needed to know, it really didn't end up being a big deal because of the relationship that we developed over the last decade. Is, yeah, he's going to tell me when I'm stupid and doing something wrong. And honestly, he's the only person that I have to ask to tell me I'm doing something stupid and doing something wrong, because everybody else is going to tell me, oh yeah, you're doing great. He was the only one. When I look for honesty,
right? You can't sugarcoat.
When I look for honesty, I might not always like what I hear, but I absorb it and take it to heart, because I know that he wants me to be successful, because that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, and if an owner set the package up correctly, it's not like he went to the bank and got the money and paid me all at once. If he's not successful, I don't get paid. It's that
Right.
simple. So, and that's, someone has to think about that when they're going to decide how to sell this business. If you're going to finance it, you better make sure you're around to help. I know too many other businesses that when, as soon as they sold out or retired, they're gone. They're in another state. They could care less what happens. I have too much pride involved with what we've built. We want to make sure that it remains successful. If I can help, I'll do it. So.
Yeah. I mean, I can attest as an employee who purchased a business, that, yeah, there are a lot of things that you're not prepared for. And I definitely came in with overconfidence with how well I thought I knew the business and knew how it operated and knew how it ran. There were a lot of like, oh, okay, that's how that works. And just had no idea, no idea. And yeah, I think to a certain extent, you can't prepare people for some things because you just don't know until it's you, right? You don't know how that feels until you are the person that is in, where the buck stops. Um, Ron, are there specific things you can think of that you wished you had had more training on or a view of before you took over? Is there anything specific you can think of that you're like, this is something I wish that employers would have their employees have a little bit more oversight of?
For me personally, I was heavily involved with a lot of the day-to-day stuff. So there wasn't anything that was so bad that I was like, oh man, I wish I'd known that. So nothing in particular in my case, but definitely on my wife's side of things. We definitely didn't spend enough time training her for what we tossed her to. We tossed her to the wolves, and surprisingly, she's still hung around with me and put up with it because
She
she
hasn't
was.
left you yet.
I remember the very first payroll we did. We had switched companies, and something happened, and our employees didn't get paid our very first payroll.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh
And,
no!
and we were in, we were down in, we were on the BioGuard trip, and I woke up in the morning and my wife was sitting there crying, like sobbing uncontrollably. She's like, nobody got paid. And she's like, I don't know what happened. Like, we set everything up. I don't know what happened. You know what I mean? And it was the first time that her first experience, her first transaction with the company, and everything completely imploded. And people were calling her, and I remember that morning. I just remember I turned over and she was sitting there just crying, and I'm like, oh boy, this is not what she signed up for, marrying me. But
When I think we both talked about it before we jumped on here, that Lindsay was the one that, like you said, got thrown to the wolves. If it's going to be a transition, again, it was my wife and I. We were partners for 25 years after I took over the business, but she had been running the books since the day we got married. So for 35 years, that's all she ever knew, and she had no education in that. But when she learned when we had 2 stores, we're doing $1 million a year, maybe 15 employees max if everything was really big. When Lindsay jumped in, it was 5 stores, many numbers higher than that, many more employees, and she had no way to learn slowly. She definitely jumped in the deep end. There was no way around it. And if I think back, if we would have taken more time to have her train, and work hand in hand, it would have made her transition much easier.
Yeah, yeah. So when you first hired Ron, you kind of planted the seed. But at what point did you guys sit down and say, okay, let's figure out how we want to make this work? Like, this is actually going to be our goal.
That was probably around 2019. Our son had finally come back with, yes, he's interested, but so we actually spoke with can't remember the name of the company. It was actually a company supplied out of BioGuard and Watkins, I think, had part to do with it, a business evaluator. And we had him come in, we had our interviews with him. He had our books for 5 or 6 months. Okay, here's what the business is worth. And when we saw the number, we of course laughed at him, because that's, again, owners think they're worth a lot. It's really not.
Yep.
What we had decided to do, since it was my son coming back in, we were going to separate the businesses out. Ron was going to be spas, retail, and service, and our son was going to be construction. So in order to make that work, we started breaking down the numbers for all those divisions. What we found out was Ron wasn't going to make it. there was going to be too much overhead for him without that construction at the point where they were at. Now, he had taken the spas 5 times the number whenever he had first started, but it just wasn't going to happen. So I think it was probably late 2019 when we said, okay, we're going to pump the brakes a little bit on this, but we know where we've got to go. If we want to do this, here's what, if you want to make this work on your end without construction, here's what you got to do. And it was increase spa sales. Well, lo and behold, January of 2020 comes along and here's COVID. So it happened very quickly. So I think once we realized what he needed to do to make it work, that seed was planted. Then when COVID hit, it's like, okay, he's going to be able to do this. Let's start making the plan. So we had set aside, I'd actually put a timer on my phone in the end of 21, August of 21. I won't tell you what it was called, but it was a countdown timer for 2 years that we were going to give up construction. I was going to close down construction and just let Ron run the business and just pay him a large amount of money. And it was very feasible to do, but my wife and I were getting tired and Ron was getting hungrier. So it's like, okay, so I think beginning of 22 is when we come in. So I guess the timer was 21. In May, my wife and I just said, basically, screw it. Let's see if he's interested enough to do this. I don't know if you even knew what was going on the day we called you and Lindsay out to lunch.
I was getting fired.
Well, not at lunch. I would have taken you to a public place.
Well, I'm like, this is going to be awkward. He invited my wife.
It was to lay out there. We'd already talked. My wife and I had already met with our accountant. We'd met with our attorneys. When we decided to do this, we literally sat down and wrote a rough draft of the buyout in about an hour on a Sunday. We talked to the attorneys and the accountant on Monday. I think we had Ron and Lindsay at lunch within a couple of days of that to say, okay, we're serious about doing this. Obviously, this is very early on. Are you interested? So it was getting serious in 2019, 21 when COVID hit, when we decided, okay, it's time to maybe settle down for us because we had to start enjoying a little bit of life that was left, and then finding out that he actually wanted to do it.
So did you end up splitting them then, and your son did construction and Ron did the retail?
Whenever we found out that it wasn't going to be successful for Ron, at the same time, our son came back and said no. He was a captain in the Army, so he was not enlisted or anything like that. He had a great career. He came back and said no. He saw what the business had done to the family. It's hard on the family. There's no way around it. And he said, I really don't want any part of that. So once we got that definite from him, it actually, and he was worried about telling us, because there's always that stress that, oh my God, we got to take the business from mom and dad. Right. We're glad that he didn't. We're very glad that he didn't. And once he made that decision not to do that, it allowed us to make more of a concentration of where we heading to, and can Ron, do this on his own. When we did the buyout, construction wasn't really a part of it. He was able to do it totally on retail, spas, and service, but he was able to go into construction as well. And it's just helping his numbers even more. So again, it's guaranteeing that we're going to get paid. So whatever help it takes, we're going to do it. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I've scheduled our next webinar to go into a lot more detail on how you guys put that deal together and structured it, because, I think you have to get a little bit creative when you're looking at an internal succession to make that work. So we'll go into more detail in that next time. It's going to be hard for me to not ask questions about that because I think it's really interesting. But did you have reservations with bringing Ron on? I mean, was there anything in the back of your mind where it's like, oh, I don't know about this guy? I mean, it's not like he's sitting right next to you. So
I would literally say it right in front of his face if I felt that way. I don't think there was. Okay. The business, back to a few minutes ago when we talked about, the business was healthy. It was profitable. It was healthy. An owner that's going to sell their business, no matter who it is that's going to buy it, that owner has to realize it's not worth what you think it is. Kick pride to the side, sit down and figure out. The first thing my wife and I did was figure out our own budget. how much do we really need
Yep.
to get by on? Because if we're going to get greedy about this, no matter how good Ron is, it's not going to work for him. It has to make sense for both parties. So I think with the business being as healthy as it was for what he created in those 11 or 12 years, there wasn't a reservation. We knew that based on the numbers we put together on our own, not the accountants, not the attorneys or anything like that, if he can make it work at this, here's what it was going to cost. Here's what he should make at the end based on these numbers. If he does it that way, there was no reservation. It should be very simple for him.
Yeah. Did COVID change your plans at all? Did it accelerate it, or did it, I mean, to be perfectly honest, did it also put enough money in your pocket that you maybe didn't need what out of your business, what you originally thought you did?
Exactly what it was. The
Okay.
evaluation that was done in 2019, we sold for 1/3 of that. And it was because COVID was so great. And we had a great business up till then, but COVID, I mean, anyone in the spa industry and the pool industry, the money was just rolling in. And because we were healthy, my wife and I don't lead a very elaborate lifestyle, anything like that. There was very little waste going on. We were able to put a lot of money aside that made us comfortable. So when we sat down and said, okay, what's it going to take? Here it is. So COVID definitely sped the process up. There's no way around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we're seeing that across the hot tub industry right now is, these owners went through COVID, made a lot of money and it was great. And, but also was exhausting. And so for the people who are kind of in that retirement, realm, it was like, hey, we're good to go. Let's make this happen now instead of waiting another 5, 6, 10 years.
Oh, we'll always word it. We're not retired. We're done with that stage of our life. And whether we go to work and do something else, but 46 years, again, I was literally installing above ground pools when I was 10. We were done with that. And
Yeah.
it was time to enjoy what was left. And again, COVID gave us that opportunity to not worry so much about it, not be greedy about it. Here's really what we need to live happily, invest happily. And that comes into part of the buyout, when we do talk about that, is, structuring those payments for Ron for our inventory. I didn't need that all up front. There was a large amount of inventory, but how do we make it to where he can survive and we can get a nice chunk of money back on it? And it worked out well. So.
Yeah. What kind of values did you look for, or were you looking for in someone to take over the business? Were there other people in the company that maybe would have been an option if Ron hadn't popped up in there?
I think we'll both answer that the same way. No.
Okay.
I would say it was sheer luck that we ended up with Ron. When we called his father-in-law, we weren't calling for Ron to come to work. We were actually calling for his sister-in-law to come from the store. So whenever his father-in-law says, I don't think she'd be interested, but I think Ron is thinking about doing something, that's sheer luck. To have a great employee to bring to them, or to bring to the conversation, hey, do you want to buy the business? That's rare that you're going to find that person with you. We have some very great employees. I don't think there's one of them that we would have ever considered.
Yeah. It wasn't my business to say that, but I didn't see anybody with the interest in it.
Yeah, for sure.
The interest is, you had ability and you're greedy. You're a mini me. And so if you're looking for qualities, you're going to look for someone that's if your business is running healthy. I wasn't looking to change that business. So why bring in someone that's completely opposite? He was the same as what I was. So it was a natural.
The running joke is my transformation to Dan Carroll is almost complete.
It's pretty much it. But he brought all of his own stuff to that, perfected that side of the business. So, and he learned, even though we didn't spend any time together, he saw what I was doing and I could see that he was doing it as I would do it. So it was a very natural thought process, I guess.
Sure. how important do you think it is, or was it for the other employees to see Ron as a leader before this transaction, took place and got to the finish line? I mean, it sounds like he built that team. So in some ways they probably already saw him as their boss.
For being there for 12 years, 11 years,
Well,
they knew what they were getting. We have other people we know that went into a business purchase cold, and those employees, they didn't last. They didn't want anything to do with this because it wasn't comfortable. They couldn't trust their future. Well, they already knew Ron was basically running the business anyhow. So it was a very easy transition for the employees because they knew what they were getting with Ron. There was no changing. So
Dan Jr.
Dan Jr. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is, I mean, and that should be one of the benefits, right, of an internal succession, is that it's a known entity to you, the owner, and also to the other people who work for you. This is someone they should know and trust already.
it made it very stable for you when those employees were all on board with him doing it. I don't think anybody left, did they? Nobody.
Nobody have keep.
No one, we
not
wouldn't have
any-
kept anyhow.
Yeah.
They were all very comfortable with that transition, and it was fast. We only had the conversation in May of 22, and he took over January 1st, 23. They already knew it. I mean, the last month or two, it was all him. So it was quicker, I think, than most businesses, but it was easy because they already knew what they were getting. So
Yeah.
It wasn't intentional, but kind of just happened organically, I think, is because Dan stepped back a lot from the day-to-day stuff and trusted me to do it. And I was the one hiring everybody.
right.
He hired a lot on his crew guys, because those are the guys he worked hand in hand with, and he was looking for a particular skill set. With the day-to-day stuff that I was dealing with the internal side of the business, I was hiring all those people for majority of the last 12
Right,
years.
right.
I mean, there was very few people that I can even think of that you were like, hey, I want to get this person on board. It was more like, hey, we gotta find someone to fill this position. And it was like, go find somebody. So the interviews were happening without Dan and Connie. They were happening with me pretty much solely.
You wrote all the employee handbooks. You did all of the interviewing. I mean, it was up to him all along. So I guess if someone's looking for who should they start looking at to buy their business? Who do they trust the most?
Yeah.
Who's running their business that they don't really give credit to run the business. Everyone thinks I'm a hands-on person. I wasn't. I left that entire part of it go till if it got to me, it was already too late. But if you can trust someone to run your business, that's someone you should be looking at. If you're willing to let them do their job that they were hired for, then that's someone you should be thinking about.
Yeah, I think sometimes, small business owners, entrepreneurs, I mean, we want to hold on to tight control to lots of things sometimes. And it can be, even if you have a capable person, it can be hard to let those things go and let those other people kind of take over and do their job. But yeah, I think it's essential for that. It's essential for a successful transition is you've given that person a lot of control already.
We'll find out if they're any good. All you can do is let them hang themselves. And if they don't, well, let's let them do another thing and do another thing. And when you find that person they're doing okay, you should be able to start thinking about, okay, I don't have to do this forever. And that's probably how it came into for Connie and I was we didn't have to think about selling the business to an outsider. Is it going to fail? We knew Ron could handle it. So let's continue on with this path.
It's not to be said that I didn't try things that failed, because
but we all do.
I tried some stuff that did not work.
If you don't try and fail, you're never going to get any better. So there's no problem with that. So
yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to mention again, if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. And I did remember to put up a poll, so you can answer the poll as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we haven't talked about. I guess I'm curious, Ron, how do you feel like how do you feel like it's gone for you through this whole process?
I would say year one was probably the hardest, I thought was the hardest year of my life.
Yeah.
In learning what I didn't know and adapting to the responsibilities of what it was.
Yeah.
And really kind of getting your brain wrapped around exactly what you were doing, because there's a lot of people that are depending on you to make it happen, and being able to shoulder the weight of the responsibility that until you're actually doing it. It's like parenthood. You don't know what it feels like to be a parent until you're a parent, and nobody can prepare you for it. You don't know what it's like to be a business owner and responsible to make sure people are paid and doing all those things until you're actually doing it. And no matter what Dan could have said to me, I would have not heard him in the correct manner.
Right.
And I know he knew that because he went through that same experience going through it. And he's like, you just have to see for yourself. And it's the same. I look at it in the same way as when I became a father. It was like, hey, I heard people tell me, oh, your life's gonna be different, your life's gonna be different, but how? And until you do it, you don't know. So I think that was part of the first struggle. And then I was so busy the first year of just trying to do all those things that now that I'm at a point where we're past that first season, now it's about, okay, what can I do better and how can I be better at my job to make this company thrive? And there's not there when you're a business owner, you don't have anybody there telling you like, hey, this is what you should do. Hey, you should look at this because you're missing opportunity here. You have to see it on your own and then be humble and be
Humble is probably the biggest word.
and aware that you are not perfect and you are going to make mistakes and you are going to screw stuff up and you're not always going to handle every situation perfectly. And no matter how much you try, and that humble pie that you eat every single day as a business owner, I don't think it really goes away. I think if it does, then you probably need to sell because you've probably been in it too long.
But after your first year, I would say you're breathing better.
I'm breathing,
definitely breathing
yeah.
better,
I mean, we're
so.
definitely breathing better. My wife, especially, like we got through the first year. Now she knows what to expect to get through the busy season. She knows what she needs to do, and she's learning every day. And like, so blessed to have her in my life because she just, I mean, I don't know many people that would have shouldered what she shouldered the first year with the experience that she had. I mean,
Come on, she married you how long ago?
well, she's been putting up with me for a long time.
Right.
That was a lot to handle then, I guess. But she had honestly, like, I feel like if you asked her that question, she would tell you a whole different story of what she had to do. And it'd probably be one of those things of, I know she wouldn't say she regrets it by any means, but she definitely was not fully aware of what was going on in this business, and adapting that side of my life for my personal life to the business side of things, being the owners and trying not to talk about it every single day of our life, is another piece of the puzzle that we're still working through. But it's been fun. Like, we're having a great time doing it. Like, it's been awesome. Like, I mean, I get to hang out with her and talk to her every day.
But I think that was one thing for the both of you. When we looked at them buying the business, it was the both of them hoping or knowing that she was going to take over that bookkeeping end of things. Well, if you find that person that's working for you, they don't actually have to be a husband-wife team. They could do this on their own, but then the plans have to be set in advance to, get that proper bookkeeping system, proper, accounting system, things like that, that's going to be handled outside. We're just believers in do it yourselves and kind of force them into it. But it's better in the long run. It's your money. You might as well have control of it. So.
Yeah. You said that Lindsay doesn't regret it now, but were there time in that first year for either of you, were there those moments where you're like, this was a mistake?
Be honest.
For me, no. I knew what I was getting into for the most part. I mean, I knew, but I didn't know, but I was comfortable because I've been doing it for so long. I have to say there might have been there's definitely a few moments throughout there where she's like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't. But the thing about it, whenever you're in, There is no, I'm not doing it. You're
Yes,
in.
you're stuck. Like it's done. It's done.
Ways to get it done. If it wasn't something she was comfortable with, you figured out how to get around it with even a different vendor or a different,
Yeah, I
you know,
mean,
outside source. So,
you know, the thing about, you know, the partnership that me and my wife have is that we communicate whenever there's problems and things that are going on in business that we need to address. And whenever she, you know, I've learned enough, like if you don't know something, find the person that knows it and hire them. And there's parts of the business that she just was not comfortable with and didn't want to necessarily do. And we had to make investments into different vendors and things like that to help outsource some of those struggles
Right.
to bring peace to the world that we live in, because she was miserable doing it. And if I didn't want her to be unhappy. So there was definitely a lot of communication. I mean, the communication has to be huge for that
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
I think
Ron, do you feel like that is the hardest transition for an employee who has bought a business? Not necessarily the skills it takes to run the business, but the kind of emotional side of being a business owner. Do you think has that been, I mean, the hardest transition is figuring out how to do that part of it, the work-life balance, the managing your family, is that harder than the other stuff?
times of the year, sure. This time of year, finding the balance, you know, I'm very involved with the baseball community with my local youth sports, and I'm passionate about doing it. I love doing it, and it's been challenging to find the time to get it done, and then also find time for the family. And there's definitely been some changes on stuff that I do personally with my free time that I've had to sacrifice to say, hey, I can't do this anymore. Even if I do like it, I can't be as committed. I can't take on those responsibilities because I have bigger responsibilities for things for ourselves, and I have to find that balance. And I definitely get the conversation 2 to 3 times a year that I'm not balanced from her, because she definitely she's my compass on all that stuff. And she'll tell me like, hey, listen, you got to cut this out. You got to spend more time doing this, or you can't be, you know, doing these types of things because it's not giving enough time to the family. So, you know, she's definitely the one who keeps me balanced on that side of things. And, you know, it's funny, you know, you talk about if you're selling to a husband and wife, or if you're selling to just one employee, you know, if you're looking at that transition, you're trying to find somebody internally, I definitely would take a look at who their spouse is.
right. They need to be part of the
Because they need to be
conversation
part of the conversation, because it's a life change. And if that spouse is not
on
all
board.
on board, all in, you could have the perfect employee do it. If there's somebody in the background that is not on board, it can be extremely destructive to the success of the transition. And I don't know if everybody looks that deep, but I think it's a look that has to be done. And because they know Lindsay her whole life, knew the background of where she came from, and know that she put up with me for all these years, that she was strong enough to take care of this.
Right.
So, you know, even when I'd hire people, not that I interviewed their spouse, but
you got informed.
but
about
I
it.
definitely got informed. I definitely dig in and try to learn about them personally, because if they ain't happy at home, or if there's problems at home, or there's an unstable relationship, you know, you get somebody that buys your business that's really great, but they are on the verge of a divorce. You know, there's a high risk for you never to get paid and for it to go bankrupt. I mean, that's a huge risk that you have to be aware of whenever you're looking at buyouts.
Yeah, it's so true. When I talk to people who own businesses, if their spouse isn't involved in the business directly, it doesn't matter. They are still involved in that business, because it is a huge part of your life, you know, not just from your income, but from your time and what you do. And yeah, I mean, my husband isn't directly involved in our business on a day-to-day basis, but
You sure talk to them a lot about it though, don't you?
well, and it's like, yeah, and and decisions I make in our business affect our family, affect him. And so there's no way around it. I mean, yeah, if he didn't support me 100%, this would have died a long time ago. Um,
Be a partnership, even if he's involved or not, it's still a partnership, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say too, I mean, for me, the hardest part of the transition was the emotional side of it that I was not prepared for. And maybe I'm too much of a bleeding heart, but but
Yeah.
that was the part that being being responsible for other people's livelihoods and families was you can say that you know how that feels, but until you are the one, you don't know what that feels like. Um and yeah, that was a hard transition for me to figure out how to live with that sort of pressure on a daily basis. So,
Half of those employees don't handle their money very well. They live paycheck to paycheck. Well, if you're not able to provide for them properly, they're not going to, they may be a great employee, but their spending styles, that's not your problem, but
yeah,
they're not around long. So it's important that, he has 50 other kids right now. It's not just them. He has to take care of 50 other families. There's 50 mouths to feed. It's a lot involved. There's a lot of stressors there. There's no doubt.
yeah, for sure. My final question to you, Dan, and then we'll finish up is who helped you? You mentioned a couple people, but who helped kind of advised you in this process, helped you, get things together? I mean, you talked about you had the valuation done and your attorney and accountant, but like who are the people that sort of helped you guys navigate this?
The most important was our accountant. It's Ron still, you're still using the same accountant. I will follow this guy into the ground. We've had him for 35 years. He's not an accountant, he's an advisor. We will literally sit down and just run things by him. When I decided to buy out my brother in 2003, he's the first one I called. Hey, what do you think about this? What can we do? When this decision came up in 21, very first person we called. I think they're the most important because, again, they know your books, they know the health of your business. The business evaluation was a joke. There's no way around it. They were paid well to, just try to sell you a product. But there's so many business evaluators out there. These companies want to buy your business. It's all done on your own. And it was our accountant and my wife and I. There was nobody else. It was just running it by ourselves. Again, the initial proposal, once Ron and Lindsay had that, you tweaked it, I tweaked it. There was very little, it's communication. And again, just not being greedy about it. Here's what we need. Here's what we want. Can this work for you? And when he uses the same accountant, used the same attorney. It was just open communication. There wasn't bickering back and forth. It wasn't, hey, he said, she said. It was, hey, how do we make this work for the best of both parties? And it got that well. So again, to me, the accountant was the most important.
Yeah, on our side, looking at it, when Dan put the proposal in front of me, I knew that he wanted it to be successful. And if the person across the table from you doesn't think that's the case, then that deal is going to be a bad deal no matter what. And if you're looking at an employee and they're looking at you uncomfortably and they're not wanting to give you what you're asking for, then you need to really take a hard look at what you're trying to do. Because I knew where Dan was going with it, and I knew what he was trying to do, and I knew he was being extremely fair with me. So it was easy for me to agree and do those things because he made it possible. And if you're not on the other side of the table looking at that employee's looking at the other side of the table and they're like not comfortable and they're not willing then there's obviously something on that piece of paper that's making them uncomfortable.
Well, and I think go clear back to the Gemini effect that Watkins ran. I mean, Ron never had our tax returns or anything, but we never hit anything towards the last 6-8 years. We started a small profit sharing on it. If the business or the person knows what the business actually is, we have nothing to hide. So if you want to hide your books and cook your books and do all that stuff, it's not going to be a very easy transition. Again, healthy books, open books, and everything just becomes much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to other people who've sold their business to an employee, and talked to the employees, years after the fact. And it's interesting because I I think there can be an element of people pleasing that comes into play. You know, you want to buy this business, you want to make this person happy who you've worked for. And, you know, and then on the other side, you have this business owner who's, yes, thinks that their business is worth more than it is and wants, you know, wants to put a number on their sweat equity. And so I think there does need to be that level of transparency, especially if you don't get a valuation done. Like I think there you need to be completely transparent, otherwise it will fail because there's because you can't guarantee the success if you don't know the real numbers, right?
He had to know those numbers going into it to know that, hey, this is the numbers we do every year. This is the cost of the mortgages that are going on to these buildings. Here's what the employees are making. If that potential person or potential owner doesn't know what's actually involved, he's going to fail way too fast. So setting those people up, having a conversation years in advance, you know, that's the suggestion I could always make. Not that we did that, but it's definitely something that would make their transition much easier. They need to know how much money is there to say, okay, yeah, I can actually make this work on my own. So
yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for doing this today. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to talk to you again to go into kind of the deal and how you made that happen. And I think it's a really important part of when you're transitioning to an employee or a family member too, is, you know, figuring out a way where they can actually afford to make this happen and live the life that they need to as well. So all right. Thank you very much. And I will send this out to everybody who wasn't able to attend live. And yeah, we'll see everybody again in a month.
that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.